Rain pounded against the mansion's glass walls as Vanessa, 7 months pregnant and trembling, stared at the man she once adored. Ethan Warren, famed entrepreneur-millionaire by 30, and darling of the Los Angeles elite, stood smugly in the foyer. His laughter echoed through the marble halls, mocking the tears streaming down her cheeks. She clutched her coat tight, heart pounding as lightning illuminated his sneering face. In that single crack of thunder, Vanessa realized their marriage had collapsed, with only a suitcase and unborn child. She stepped into the storm. Her husband's triumphant chuckle was the last sound she heard before disappearing into the night. Ethan Warren's rise to wealth had been meteoric. The son of an electrician from Riverside, California, he'd attended public schools and barely scraped by in community college. Everyone said he was a dreamer, and they were right. But what set Ethan apart was his relentless drive. At 19, he launched a small tech startup in his parents' cramped garage. That ambitious venture, Titan Wave Solutions, would eventually morph into a multi-million-dollar tech consultancy sought after by Fortune 500 companies. Growing up modestly, Ethan promised himself that one day he'd have the life of the rich and famous. He devoured biographies of self-made magnates Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Mark Cuban. He cut out motivational quotes and pinned them above his rickety desk. Your legacy is being written by yourself. Make the right decisions. Read one from the Gary Vaynerchuk. By the time he was 25, Ethan was making headlines in tech publications, earning interviews on CNBC, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Tim Cook at Silicon Valley galas. That kind of success brought with it a newfound arrogance. He was unstoppable, at least in his own eyes. The same grit that propelled him to stardom often morphed into ruthlessness. And while he was charming at investor meetings, he seldom showed that same warmth at home. Years later, Ethan had upgraded from his parents' garage to an opulent mansion in Bel Air. He sported custom-tailored suits, hosted lavish parties with celebrities, and employed a small army of staff to keep up appearances. Yet beneath the glitz and glamour, a persistent restlessness plagued him. He wanted more, always more, and no one would stand in his way, or so he believed. When he met Vanessa Coleman, a reserved but brilliant interior designer, Ethan sensed he had finally found someone who could match his drive and complement his ambitions. But the seeds of pride and obsession were already planted. Their meeting would change both of their lives forever. Vanessa Coleman was born and raised in a quiet suburb near Sacramento. From an early age, she displayed an almost mystical talent for design. As a child, she'd rearrange her room each month, turning cluttered corners into cozy nooks, painting bold murals on her walls that made her parents shake their heads in both wonder and mild exasperation. After excelling in high school art classes, she attended a prestigious design program at the Parsons School of Design in New York City. Vanessa thrived in that cosmopolitan environment, her professors impressed by her intuitive grasp of color theory, and spatial arrangement mentored her closely. By her final year, one of her interior design projects was featured in an Architectural Digest exhibition, garnering local buzz. Through a recommendation from a former professor, Vanessa landed a contract to design the Los Angeles penthouse suite of William Stone, a longtime billionaire philanthropist. Stone's property had historical significance, and the project needed both a modern twist and a delicate respect for heritage. Vanessa poured every ounce of creativity into that gig. When the penthouse was unveiled, it attracted the city's wealthiest and most influential, each eager to see the brilliant work of this young designer. Ethan Warren happened to be a guest of William Stone that night. He was instantly captivated by the tasteful minimalist approach, elegant, bold, and surprisingly warm. While sipping champagne in front of a newly installed indoor fountain, Ethan spotted Vanessa from across the room, radiant in a simple black cocktail dress. Something about her quiet confidence drew him in. He approached with that signature grin, introduced himself, and offered to show her his own Bel Air property. Their first encounter was electric, brimming with creative synergy and shared ambition. Neither realized it yet, but from that moment on their fates were entwined. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Ethan, enthralled by Vanessa's talent and genuine kindness, spared no expense in wooing her. Helicopter rides over Malibu at sunset, candlelit dinners prepared by Michelin-starred chefs, private tours of art galleries. Nothing was too extravagant for the man whose pockets knew no limit. To his pleasure, Vanessa seemed more impressed by authentic gestures than mere displays of wealth. A heartfelt note or a simple stroll on the beach often meant more to her than $1,000 dinner plates. Ethan's charm was at its peak during those early months. He found Vanessa's creative spirit exhilarating. She offered ideas for his new office space at Titan Wave Solutions, suggesting splashes of color and organic textures to cultivate innovation. He, in turn, dazzled her with tales of entrepreneurial triumphs and introduced her to high-profile clients, potential big-ticket projects that could elevate her career. Yet not all was flawless under the surface. Vanessa sometimes glimpsed flashes of arrogance in Ethan's demeanor, especially when a waitress refilled his coffee too slowly, or a junior executive fumbled a presentation. In those moments, his impatience and sense of superiority seeped through. His disregard for boundaries was another subtle red flag. He assumed everyone existed to serve his vision, rarely pausing to ask for others' perspectives. When Vanessa mentioned needing time to cultivate her design portfolio, he waved it off. "Once we're married, you'll have all the resources in the world," he assured her, with a dismissive smirk. Still, she chalked it up to his relentless drive, a trait she had come to admire. So she let the small stuff slide, convincing herself that nobody was perfect. Love and optimism can often blind us to cautionary signs. Vanessa focused on the promise of a bright, shared future, completely unaware of the heartbreak soon lurking on the horizon. Ethan proposed 6 months into their relationship, whisking Vanessa away to Lake Como, Italy, under the guise of a last-minute business trip. After a moonlit dinner on a lakeside terrace, he knelt on one knee and produced a shimmering diamond ring the size of a grape. Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes as she accepted. Amid the flicker of candlelight and the soft lapping of waves, she believed in their fairy tale. Back in Los Angeles, wedding preparations went into overdrive. The press got wind of Ethan's high-profile engagement, and gossip columns splashed their photos across glossy pages. Titan Wave Solutions soared even higher in the stock market. Investors loved a glamorous success story. Vanessa busied herself picking venues, sampling menus, and scheduling fittings. She was overwhelmed, but in a good way. This was the life she'd dreamed of, or so she thought. Less than a month before their wedding, Vanessa discovered she was pregnant. It was unplanned, but not unwelcome. She expected Ethan to be thrilled, imagining him cradling her gently as he showered the unborn child with excited kisses. Instead, his reaction was strangely muted. He offered a perfunctory, "That's great news," followed by a quick pivot to a phone call he had to take. In the days that followed, he hardly brought it up. At first, Vanessa felt hurt, but she pushed away her disappointment, attributing his aloofness to work stress. The wedding itself was a star-studded extravaganza at a picturesque vineyard outside Santa Barbara. Paparazzi camped outside the gates, capturing each detail: the designer dress, the A-list guests, and Ethan's triumphant grin. Standing at the altar, Vanessa told herself Ethan's wedding day excitement would translate into fatherly joy soon enough. Yet the nagging feeling lingered that he was more excited about the spectacle than the commitment or the child they now shared. Married life brought fresh challenges. With Titan Wave expanding globally, Ethan was constantly on phone calls with business partners in Tokyo, Berlin, Sydney. He flew out at a moment's notice, sometimes leaving Vanessa alone in their cavernous mansion for days on end. Once he missed a critical prenatal appointment because he'd jetted off to New York for a pitch meeting. When Vanessa voiced her concerns about his absence, Ethan would wave them off. "I'm doing this for our future," he'd say, swirling a glass of top-shelf whiskey. "We have everything we need, don't we? You can see Dr. Bernard on your own." His flippant attitude stung. Vanessa tried to remind him that their baby needed a present father as much as the next business deal, but Ethan dismissed the notion, placing success above all else. Cracks in their relationship widened. Vanessa's nights grew lonely, listening to the echo of her own footsteps across marble floors. She busied herself with design projects, hoping to quell the creeping sense of isolation. Yet the more she tried to hold on to normalcy, the more Ethan drifted into a world of spreadsheets, contracts, and power lunches. One evening, she tried to connect with him by showing designs for the baby's nursery, weaving in both futuristic and organic elements, a style she believed symbolized the blending of their two worlds. Ethan glanced up from his laptop with half-hearted interest. "Sure, that's fine," he said, hardly bothering to look. "Just send me the bill." Vanessa's heart sank. She yearned for him to be a partner, not just a paymaster. Still, she soldiered on, telling herself that once the baby arrived, Ethan would realize what truly mattered. Little did she know that the storm gathering between them was about to erupt in full force. It happened on a night of torrential rain, the kind that turned the Bel Air hills into glistening sheets of water. Vanessa had spent the day feeling uneasy, sharp twinges in her back and swirling doubts in her mind. By dinner time, her anxiety grew. Where was Ethan? He was supposed to be home early for once. A phone call came around 9. Ethan sounded irritated. "I'm stuck at the office," he barked. "Some incompetent junior messed up the projections. I'll be late. Don't wait up." By midnight, he finally walked in. Clothes damp, a sour expression on his face. Vanessa tried to greet him, but he brushed her aside. "Not now," he muttered. "I've had enough stress for one day." She followed him into the living room, determined to talk. "Ethan, I need you to listen to me. The baby." But Ethan whirled around, eyes blazing. "The baby. The baby. Is that all you can talk about? Don't you realize I'm under pressure, building an empire? Everything I do is for us. Yet you're never satisfied." Or lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the hurt on Vanessa's face. She drew a shaky breath, tears already welling. "I'm your wife," she said quietly. "Your pregnant wife. Can't you see how alone I feel? How little you're here?" Thunder rumbled. Ethan erupted in sarcastic laughter. "Alone, in a 12-bedroom mansion with staff waiting on you hand and foot. Poor Vanessa, you've got it so rough, don't you?" In that searing moment, something in Vanessa snapped. She grabbed her coat, tears blurring her vision. "I'm leaving," she choked out, voice trembling. "I can't live like this anymore." Ethan stared, thunder booming overhead. Then he laughed. Go ahead, he sneered. But don't expect me to come running after you. She turned and walked into the storm alone. The downpour hit Vanessa like a cold slap. Within seconds, rainwater soaked her coat, dripped into her shoes, and plastered her hair to her face. She stumbled down the driveway, struggling to focus on each step. 7 months pregnant, she felt every bit of the exhaustion clinging to her bones. Her suitcase handle was slippery, but she clutched it with fierce determination. Lightning lit up the sky, revealing the empty streets beyond Ethan's sprawling estate. She had nowhere to go, no plan, no place prepared. Her closest friends had gradually slipped away, discouraged by Ethan's dominating presence. Her parents were far up in Sacramento, and she didn't want to shock them at this late hour. But one thought kept her going. She deserved better than the humiliating scorn she'd just endured. After staggering through the rain for nearly half a mile, a pair of headlights broke through the darkness. A grey sedan pulled up. The driver rolled down the window, revealing a familiar face, Rachel Thompson, a kind-hearted acquaintance from Vanessa's college days at Parsons, who'd moved to LA a few years back to pursue a career in art curation. They'd kept in sporadic touch, but Vanessa never expected a rescue at such a dire moment. Vanessa. "Oh my goodness," Rachel exclaimed, leaping out to help. "What happened? You're drenched and you're pregnant. Get in the car right now." Relief washed over Vanessa stronger than the rain. She collapsed into the passenger seat, breath hitching in silent sobs. As they drove off, she glanced back at the looming silhouette of the mansion, wondering if Ethan was still watching, if he even cared. She felt like she was drowning, literally and figuratively, but one tiny spark of hope remained. She was no longer alone on this journey. Ethan, meanwhile, stood at the foyer window, watching the faint glow of the car's taillights disappear into the rain. A smirk tugged at his lips. He felt a twinge of satisfaction, certain this was just another of Vanessa's emotional outbursts. She'd come crawling back, didn't they all? In his world, everything and everyone eventually bent to his will. He poured himself another tumbler of whiskey and walked into his personal study, decorated with trophies of success, framed front pages from Forbes press clippings lauding his entrepreneurial genius awards from industry summits. He'd practically conquered every obstacle in his life. Yes, he told himself this would blow over in a day or two. Instead of dwelling on Vanessa, Ethan turned his attention to Titan Wave's latest expansion deal. He had a call scheduled with top executives at a multinational conglomerate in Hong Kong. If successful, it would push the company's valuation past the billion-dollar mark. That was his priority, far more significant in his view than any domestic squabble. By the time morning arrived, Ethan had signed a crucial preliminary agreement. He felt unstoppable, convinced that no personal crisis could overshadow his corporate triumph. When one of the household staff timidly asked if Mrs. Warren was still out, Ethan waved him off. "She'll be back," he declared, arrogance dripping from every syllable. He had no idea how wrong he was. For the next week, the staff reported no calls from Vanessa, no sign of her car or credit card use. By day 10, gossip in the mansion's corridors suggested she might not come back at all. Even so, Ethan refused to show any concern. In his world, money solved every problem. If Vanessa chose to vanish, that was her loss. He was too busy shaping the next big corporate coup to be bothered. Rachel drove Vanessa to her modest one-bedroom apartment in Silver Lake, a stark contrast to the palatial grandeur Vanessa had left behind. But it was warm and dry, and for that, Vanessa was immensely grateful. The two women settled on a couch piled high with mismatched cushions. A single lamp illuminated the room, casting gentle shadows. With shaking hands, Vanessa recounted what had happened. Rachel listened intently, offering tissues and gentle words. Despite the shock, Vanessa realized an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time in ages, she could speak freely, unafraid of belittlement or scorn. As night turned to dawn, they formulated a plan. Rachel's meager savings wouldn't go far, but she had connections in the local art scene. Maybe she could leverage them to find Vanessa temporary design gigs. Vanessa still had her professional credentials. Even if Ethan had overshadowed her finances, he couldn't erase her talent. The following week, Rachel took Vanessa to small design firms, introduced her to gallery owners, and arranged low-key meetings. Word spread that Vanessa Warren, famed millionaire's wife, was available for freelance work. Curiosity alone intrigued potential clients. Soon she secured a few modest interior design projects. Nothing compared to the scale of her previous endeavors. But it was a start. Exhaustion weighed on Vanessa, but she pressed forward, determined to create a stable environment for her unborn child. At night, she was haunted by memories of Ethan's laughter ringing in her ears. She didn't want revenge, not yet at least. She just wanted to stand on her own 2 feet. Little did she realize that her quiet determination would become the catalyst for something far bigger, a catalyst that would lead her back into Ethan's world, but on terms he'd never see coming. Vanessa's breakthrough arrived unexpectedly, through a dinner invitation from an old acquaintance, William Stone, the billionaire philanthropist whose penthouse she had designed years ago. Stone heard whispers around town that Vanessa was seeking a fresh start. Intrigued and concerned, he reached out to see how he might help. Rachel accompanied Vanessa to Stone's private residence in Brentwood, a sprawling estate filled with art from around the world. Over a sumptuous meal, Stone listened intently to Vanessa's story. He wasn't just sympathetic, he was genuinely outraged at how Ethan had dismissed her. The older billionaire had seen the best and worst of corporate America, and Ethan's arrogance reminded him of young upstarts who believed themselves invincible. Over dessert, Stone leaned forward, his voice smooth yet resolute. Vanessa, I have a proposal. There's a boutique hotel project I'm backing in Santa Monica. We're looking to create a cutting-edge interior that merges sustainability with luxury. I think your vision could be invaluable. Vanessa's eyes lit up. A project like that could propel her back into the high-end design circuit, not to mention bolster her financial independence. But Stone wasn't finished. I've also heard rumblings that Titan Wave is on the verge of a massive expansion. Ethan's been floating the idea of an IPO to major shareholders. If he goes public, everything changes. The control structure will shift. Let's just say there might be an opportunity for someone. Someone with the right resources to gain a seat at that table. Confusion flitted across Vanessa's face. Why was Stone telling her this? He gave a knowing smile. Sometimes, life hands you a chance to regain your footing, and even the score, whether you take it or not, is up to you. Vanessa looked at her swollen belly heart pounding. A single word echoed in her mind: opportunity. Back at Titan Wave, Ethan was finalizing plans for the initial public offering with his executive team and a group of well-connected investors. They held marathon meetings analyzing market conditions, grooming financial statements, and scheduling roadshows for potential shareholders. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement. An IPO could catapult Titan Wave into a global behemoth. Ethan would stand to make hundreds of millions overnight if everything went smoothly. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. Certain senior employees grumbled about Ethan's autocratic leadership style. He'd burned bridges with key partners, dismissing their concerns about technology patents and intellectual property rights. Some long-time employees privately shared that they'd never seen him more reckless. Growth at any cost was his mantra, and they feared the cost might be too high. In board meetings, Ethan displayed a new level of arrogance. With the unstoppable momentum of an IPO fueling his ego, he treated dissent as treason, sneering at even mild challenges. "Trust me," he would say, brandishing charts. "I built Titanwave from the ground up, and I'll steer it exactly where it needs to go." Outside those glass boardroom walls, rumors circulated that Ethan's personal life was in freefall. Vanessa's absence was notable previously. She'd accompanied Ethan to every major event. Now speculation ran wild. Some said she was off traveling, others hinted at marital strife. Ethan deflected any personal questions with a dismissive smirk. Meanwhile, the upcoming IPO stirred interest among major market players, including Stone's circle of investment bankers. As they dug deeper into Titanwave's financial data, they found vulnerabilities, overvalued assets, intangible intellectual property, and a precariously high burn rate. Yet none of it halted Ethan's ambition. He believed himself untouchable, the master of his destiny. But he had no idea that events were already in motion to humble him in ways he never anticipated. While Ethan was caught up in IPO mania, Vanessa poured her heart and soul into William Stone's hotel project. She worked late nights perfecting designs that combined natural elements, reclaimed wood, living plant walls, recycled glass sculptures with sleek contemporary lines. Her growing belly limited her physically, but her determination never wavered. Each completed sketch fueled Vanessa's resolve. For so long, she'd been overshadowed by Ethan's monumental ambitions. Now it was her turn to shine on her own merit. And as William Stone had hinted, the hotel project was just the beginning. Word spread quickly among Stone's business associates about the pregnant designer forging a new path without her millionaire husband. Designing while pregnant presented its own challenges, from swollen ankles to sudden waves of nausea. Yet Vanessa found the process therapeutic. Creating beauty in external spaces helped heal the chaos that had once reigned in her heart. She even started feeling her baby move more regularly, gentle kicks and flutters that reminded her of her ultimate purpose. At each meeting, Stone discreetly introduced Vanessa to influential financiers, attorneys and business consultants who had the inside scoop on Titanwave's impending IPO. These introductions weren't random. Stone had a plan. One evening at a small soiree in his garden, Stone led Vanessa to a reserved table where a tall man in a tailored suit waited. Vanessa Stone said quietly, "This is Benjamin Caldwell, an expert in corporate acquisitions. He's worked with me for years, and I trust him implicitly." Vanessa extended her hand, perplexed but curious. Caldwell flashed a cordial smile. "I've been briefed on your situation," he said politely. "If you're looking for a position of strength regarding Titanwave, and by extension your personal interests, I might be able to help." Vanessa's pulse quickened. She'd never imagined taking on Ethan on the corporate battlefield, but perhaps fate was guiding her there. As Vanessa's third trimester approached, she experienced a scare that tested her resilience. One afternoon, while inspecting site renovations at the Santa Monica Hotel, she felt a sudden, sharp pain in her abdomen. Her vision blurred and her knees buckled. Crew members rushed to her aid, helping her sit as they dialed for an ambulance. At the hospital, doctors discovered she was overworked and dehydrated. Stress levels were sky high, putting her at risk for premature labor. She lay in a stark white room, hooked to IV fluids, tears brimming in her eyes. For a moment she regretted pushing herself so hard. Maybe she thought she should just return to Ethan's mansion, endure his egotism for the sake of her child's safety. Rachel and William Stone visited, bringing flowers and encouraging her to rest. Rachel gently reminded her that a secure, peaceful environment mattered more than any paycheck or design project. Stone, ever the mentor, offered financial support if it meant Vanessa could slow down. But Vanessa refused. She wasn't about to give up the independence she'd begun carving out. Still, the scare made her realize she needed a better support system. That evening, the nurse delivered surprising news. Someone had called in, asking about her condition. The name, Ethan Warren. Despite everything, Ethan had apparently learned of her hospitalization and inquired about her health. Vanessa's heart clenched. She half expected him to barge in, but no one came. The next morning, her doctor stressed that she needed moderate bed rest and significantly reduced stress. Vanessa agreed, making arrangements with Stone to manage her design tasks remotely for a while. Tucked into a hotel suite near the hospital, courtesy of Stone, she used the downtime to reflect. If Ethan was still monitoring her, perhaps he cared more than he let on. Or maybe he was just curious. Either way, she was determined to see her plan through. A week into her partial bed rest, Vanessa met with Benjamin Caldwell at Stone's estate. She arrived in the late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows on the manicured lawns. Caldwell greeted her with a friendly nod, his manner professional but warm. He wasted no time diving into details. Titan Wave's IPO is set to launch next quarter. The valuation is ambitious, but as we speak, institutional investors are positioning themselves to buy sizable chunks of the company. If we move swiftly, we can acquire shares quietly before public trading opens, building a significant stake. Vanessa blinked, feeling a surge of anxiety mixed with excitement. But how would I manage that I don't have that kind of capital? Caldwell smiled reassuringly. You don't, but William Stone does, and he's willing to back you. The arrangement can be structured so that you're essentially the beneficial owner of the shares. We'll keep it under wraps until the time is right. Vanessa's mind raced. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a seismic shift in power dynamics. She recalled Ethan's mocking laughter, his dismissive tone, the cold nights in that cavernous mansion. The chance to show him she was more than just a decoration was tantalizing. But was it vengeance, or was it a stand for her and her child's future? Sensing her hesitation, Caldwell softened his tone. This is your decision. Stone is doing this because he sees your potential and respects your talent. He despises how Ethan treated you, but he won't force your hand. Think about the life you want for your baby. Once you hold a majority stake in Titan Wave, you'll have leverage Ethan can't ignore. Vanessa exhaled, aware this was the pivot in her journey. Let's do it, she whispered. I'm ready. Rumors began swirling in the corridors of Titan Wave that a secret investor was quietly amassing significant shares. Ethan and his CFO noticed unusual activity in the private placement rounds leading up to the IPO. But the shares were being purchased through shell companies and holding firms each meticulously layered to disguise the ultimate beneficiary. Ethan brushed off these concerns initially. Money was money, and if someone believed strongly enough in Titan Wave's future to buy large blocks of pre-IPO shares that only validated his genius, his attention was laser-focused on the roadshows in New York and London, where he dazzled prospective investors with grand visions of global expansion, advanced AI solutions, and market dominance. However, As the final weeks ticked down to the IPO date, the CFO's tone shifted. "Ethan," he said nervously, during a late-night strategy session, "this new investor's holdings exceed 5%. They might be angling for a seat on the board. If they cross 10%, that's a significant stake." Ethan shrugged. "I've done my due diligence. Our stock is hot. Everyone wants in. It's not unusual." "But we don't know who they are," the CFO insisted. "It's not typical for an investor to stay so hidden unless they're planning a takeover or a major power move. We need more intel." Ethan waved him off. "Fine, hire someone to dig. We're too big for any single investor to topple me. I hold the lion's share. Relax." Behind that confident veneer, a sliver of doubt began gnawing at Ethan. He prided himself on control over his company, his staff, even his personal relationships. The idea that someone might be maneuvering behind the scenes to challenge him was unsettling. Still, he decided he had bigger fish to fry. Titan Wave's public debut was around the corner, and he was about to become 10 times wealthier. Let the mysterious investors reveal themselves if they dared. In her hotel suite, Vanessa monitored each milestone in Titan Wave's IPO progression. She spoke regularly with Caldwell, reviewing stock purchase agreements, analyzing corporate bylaws, and ensuring their newly formed consortium complied with SEC regulations. The complexity was dizzying. She found herself in a world of suits, legal jargon, and half-smiles that hinted at high-stakes manipulation. It was a stark contrast to the quiet life she'd once envisioned, designing spaces, finding solace in creative expression. Yet she couldn't deny a growing sense of empowerment. Each share they acquired felt like reclaiming a piece of her voice, drowned out for so long by Ethan's overbearing persona. Outside of these dealings, Vanessa maintained a routine of prenatal classes, gentle yoga, and remote design sessions for the Santa Monica Hotel. Rachel supported her every step, lending moral support and occasionally accompanying her to doctor's visits. Whenever doubts crept in, fears that she was stepping too far into a game she barely understood, Rachel reminded her why she'd started this journey. Her unborn child deserved a stable, respectful environment. If securing her future meant meeting Ethan on the battlefield, he understood best finance, then so be it. William Stone provided the capital, but he did so quietly, letting Vanessa's name remain at the forefront of the holding entities. He wanted her to own her triumph. He also confided that he had personal reasons for wanting to curtail Ethan's arrogance. "I've seen men like him," Stone murmured one afternoon as they reviewed documents. "They take the world by storm, but leave a trail of broken promises. It's time someone forced him to see the consequences of his actions." Vanessa nodded, eyes resolute. The day of reckoning neared. She no longer felt like a pawn in Ethan's empire. She was the one rewriting the rules, one share at a time. IPO day arrived. Cameras flashed as Ethan stepped onto the stage at the New York Stock Exchange. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, Titan Wave's logo pinned to his lapel, he exuded confidence. He offered a triumphant grin to the cheering crowd of employees, investors, and reporters. The opening bell rang, and the crowd erupted in applause. Ethan's eyes sparkled with the thrill of validation. He had taken Titan Wave from his parents' garage to Wall Street's stage. It was the pinnacle of his career until everything began to shift. As the day wore on, the CFO discreetly handed Ethan a folder. Inside was the updated shareholder registry. Under notable holdings, one name jumped out: the Caldwell Stone Consortium. They had acquired a staggering 22% of the shares. Ethan's heart lurched, though he managed to keep his composure. "Who the hell is behind this?" he hissed at the CFO, stepping away from the cameras for a moment. Stone's a known entity, but he's never been partial to Titan Wave. The CFO replied, sweating. As for Caldwell, he's a corporate lawyer who handles high-profile acquisitions. We suspect they're representing a silent partner, but we don't know who. Ethan's mind raced, cycling through potential rivals. Stone was wealthy enough to buy large stakes, but for what purpose? Had Ethan slighted him in the past? A memory flickered of Stone's penthouse unveiling. Vanessa had been there. Stone had introduced them. Could Stone be meddling because of Vanessa? While reporters clamored for interviews, Ethan's smile stayed pinned, but his insides churned. By market close, Titan Wave scored in its debut, making him richer on paper than ever. Yet for the first time, Ethan felt a creeping vulnerability. Some unknown adversary had secured a massive foothold in his company. It was a strategic ambush, and he had no clue where it would lead. 2 days after the IPO launch, Ethan's world took an unexpected turn. A formal request landed on his desk, signed by the Caldwell-Stone Consortium, demanding an extraordinary shareholder meeting. The reason: concerns over corporate governance and a motion to elect new board members. Ethan stared at the document, his pulse quickening. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was a legal obligation. He slammed the paper onto his desk. "Who the hell do they think they are?" he barked, pacing furiously. "I built Titan Wave from scratch. They want to tell me how to run it. Now." Despite his fury, Ethan's legal team advised compliance. Corporate bylaws were clear: shareholders with sufficient equity could request such a meeting. There was no choice but to face them. The meeting was scheduled at Titan Wave's headquarters in Los Angeles, under tight security and flashing media cameras that had caught wind of a brewing power struggle inside the billion-dollar company. On the morning of the meeting, Vanessa stood in front of the mirror, smoothing her tailored maternity dress over her full belly. At nearly 9 months pregnant, every movement was deliberate, but her spirit was anything but slow. Her eyes held clarity, her jaw set with conviction. This was the moment she had prepared for, not just to confront Ethan, but to claim what she had built with her own hands, her own pain and her unborn child's future in mind. She arrived through a private side entrance, escorted by Caldwell and flanked by William Stone. The three entered the boardroom with quiet authority. Inside, Ethan sat at the head of the table, surrounded by loyal executives and his legal advisors. He looked up and froze. Vanessa walked in, composed and poised, her presence commanding the room. For a heartbeat, time held its breath. Ethan's jaw twitched, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "You," he muttered. Vanessa didn't flinch. She approached the long glass table and gently laid down a sheaf of documents. "These papers certify beneficial ownership of the Caldwell-Stone shares," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Per agreement, I hold voting rights equivalent to 22% of Titan Wave's stock, effective immediately." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's smirk faltered. His eyes scanned the papers, his confidence buckling. "You're bluffing," he said coldly. "You're just a designer. You don't know what you're doing." Vanessa met his glare with calm intensity. "I may be a designer, but I'm also a mother, a shareholder, and someone who knows what it's like to be underestimated. That ends today." Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "This is my company." "No," she said quietly. "This is a company with hundreds of employees, stakeholders, and a future that deserves better than your ego." Caldwell stood and outlined the proposal, a motion to restructure the board and appoint new leadership focused on long-term sustainability, transparency, and ethical governance. Ethan interrupted repeatedly, accusing them of sabotage and betrayal. But every outburst only revealed his desperation. Board members glanced at each other, once loyal, but now uncertain. Vanessa spoke again, her voice now laced with compassion. "I'm not here to destroy what you built, Ethan. I'm here to protect it from you." With that, the vote commenced. One by one, members raised their hands. As the final count was tallied, it became clear Vanessa's coalition had achieved a majority. The gavel struck. Ethan was no longer the unchallenged king of Titan Wave. He stared at Vanessa, breathing heavily, a storm raging in his chest. But she didn't gloat. She merely stood, placing a gentle hand on her belly. "The rain didn't wash me away, Ethan," she said softly. "It prepared me." And with that, she walked out of the boardroom, not as a victim, but as the woman who rewrote the ending to her own story. The extraordinary shareholder meeting commenced under a heavy cloud of anticipation. Titan Wave's top brass investors, attorneys, and board members filled the sleek Los Angeles headquarters' largest conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline beyond, but all eyes were fixed inward on the polished mahogany table where corporate power was about to shift. Ethan sat at the head of the table, stone-faced shoulders tight beneath his designer suit. He still looked the part of a visionary CEO, but the confidence that once radiated from him now simmered with barely restrained panic. His mind raced with questions. What was Vanessa's endgame? How had she orchestrated this? And worst of all, how had he not seen it coming? The door opened. In stepped William Stone, calm and commanding as ever, followed by Benjamin Caldwell, who offered only a brief, polite nod. Then came Vanessa. Gasps rippled across the room. She entered with a quiet grace that silenced every whisper. 8 months pregnant, dressed in an elegant navy blouse and tailored coat, Vanessa looked every bit the woman Ethan had once dismissed and now had to face on equal footing. She met Ethan's eyes and saw the shock there. It was the same look he'd had the first time she'd ever challenged him, back when she'd redesigned his office and told him glass and concrete couldn't buy warmth. Ethan half rose, as if unsure whether to confront her or welcome her. "Vanessa," he muttered, voice caught between disbelief and dread. She walked to the table without pause, laid down a folder, and addressed the board. "As legal documentation confirms, I am the beneficial owner of the Caldwell Stone shares, accounting for 22% of Titan Wave's equity. That grants me full voting rights, including participation in this meeting." A stunned silence. Ethan's mouth parted, but no words came. Caldwell cleared his throat and launched into the formal motion. "We are calling for the election of new board members in light of recent concerns regarding corporate governance, over-leveraging, and potential liabilities related to aggressive expansion." Ethan found his voice. "This is absurd. A hostile takeover by someone who doesn't even understand the tech industry." He glared at Vanessa. "You're a designer, not a CEO. You don't know how any of this works." Vanessa turned to him slowly. "No, Ethan, I'm not a tech CEO. But I know how you work." Her voice remained calm, but each word landed like a hammer. "I watched you steamroll people. I watched you ignore warnings from experts. I lived under your roof while you played king and forgot what it meant to be human." Several board members shifted in their seats, eyes darting between the two. Vanessa continued, "I'm not here to destroy Titan Wave. I'm here to help save it from becoming another cautionary tale of unchecked ego. I want to help steer it back to innovation, collaboration, and integrity." Ethan slammed his hand on the table. "You want to talk integrity? You blindsided me. You manipulated Stone into backing you." William Stone leaned forward, voice smooth but firm. "No one manipulated me, Ethan. I made a choice. One you gave me every reason to make." Ethan's eyes flared. "I built this from nothing. You think you can walk in, you who abandoned her family name to ride my coattails and hijack it?" Vanessa's face remained composed, but her eyes gleamed. "I didn't abandon anything. I left behind your control, your cruelty, and your condescension. What I didn't leave behind was my spine or my vision." The room held its breath. Caldwell returned to the agenda. "We propose the following slate of new board directors." Names were listed respected figures in business, finance, and technology, including 2 women Vanessa had personally selected for their innovation-first mindset. A heated back and forth followed. Ethan rallied his allies, invoking his legacy, his sacrifices, his years of dominance. But for the first time, his charm rang hollow. The room didn't see a maverick, only a man desperate to preserve control. Then Vanessa stood again. "You taught me something, Ethan," she said softly. "You taught me that power doesn't ask permission." "Well, I'm not asking any more." With that, the vote began. One by one, hands were raised. Board members who once echoed Ethan's vision now hesitated, weighed the risks, and slowly sided with Vanessa's coalition. The final count confirmed it. The majority now belonged to the new guard. Ethan Warren was no longer in sole command. He slumped back in his chair, the weight of years crashing onto his shoulders. The company he had built, his pride, his fortress, had pivoted beneath him. Vanessa looked at him not with triumph, but with solemn clarity. "This isn't revenge," she said gently. "It's restoration." And with that, the meeting adjourned. The boardroom emptied, murmurs of a new era swirling through the air. Ethan remained seated, eyes distant, as Vanessa exited without looking back. She wasn't just reclaiming her power, she was rewriting the future. And this time, she held the pen. In the days following the shareholder coup, headlines exploded across every major outlet. Pregnant wife topples tech titan. Vanessa Warren ousts husband in stunning boardroom power shift. The Queen's Gambit. How Vanessa Warren outplayed Silicon Valley's favorite son. To some, it was a scandal straight out of a Netflix drama. To others, it was a case study in poetic justice. But to Vanessa, it wasn't about revenge or headlines. It was about reclaiming her dignity, securing her child's future, and finally stepping out from behind Ethan's shadow. She spent the next week meeting with TitanWave's restructured board and executive leadership. They gathered in a smaller, more collaborative setting gone were the stiff, oversized boardrooms Ethan preferred. The tone had shifted. Executives spoke more freely, sharing concerns that had long been suppressed. Vanessa listened intently, not to dictate, but to understand. "I'm not here to micromanage," she told them, hands resting gently on her pregnant belly. "TitanWave is a company of innovators. I want to protect that. All I ask is that we lead with transparency, ethics, and vision." The board responded positively. They voted in an interim CEO, a seasoned technologist, who had once clashed with Ethan, but had always been respected for his balanced leadership. Internally, employees breathed a sigh of relief. Word spread quickly through TitanWave's Slack channels and office corridors. The new era had begun. But for Ethan, the fallout was relentless. His name remained on the founder plaque, but he no longer held decision-making power. His email was restricted, his office reassigned. Clients began demanding renegotiated terms. Analysts questioned whether the company's meteoric rise had been fueled more by image than substance. The same media that once celebrated him now scrutinized every detail of his leadership failures. His inner circle fractured. His longtime CFO resigned, citing philosophical differences. A few prominent venture capital firms quietly distanced themselves. Even some of his personal friends stopped returning calls. Ethan retreated to his Bel Air mansion, where opulence now felt like a prison. Rooms that once buzzed with staff and guests now echoed with silence. He wandered through marble hallways like a ghost, haunted by the rain-soaked night Vanessa had walked out, and the meeting where she'd walked back in and taken control. For days he didn't leave the estate. He drank, raged through things. But eventually the storm inside him began to settle, not from peace but from exhaustion. Then one afternoon, a familiar name popped up in the news: the Santa Monica Boutique Hotel project. The photos showed Vanessa radiant and composed, touring the nearly completed site. She looked strong, focused, maternal. Her baby bump was prominent beneath a stylish trench coat. Something stirred in Ethan. Not jealousy, not even anger. It was a foreign sensation. Regret. The next day, he got into his car and drove to Santa Monica. Security stopped him at the hotel entrance, but after a brief conversation and a call placed upstairs, Vanessa agreed to meet him in one of the model suites. She stood by the window overlooking the ocean when he walked in. She turned slowly. Ethan. He looked older, worn down. There was no arrogance in his eyes now, only uncertainty. I saw the article, he said quietly. The hotel looks beautiful. Thank you. A pause stretched between them. I didn't come to fight, he said. I just needed to see you. Vanessa studied him for a moment. What is it you want to say? He took a breath. I was wrong. About everything. About how I treated you. About thinking I could build an empire and ignore the cost. I never really saw you, Vanessa, not as an equal, not as a partner. And I'm sorry. It was the first genuine apology he had ever given her. And while it didn't undo the pain, it didn't go unnoticed. She nodded, keeping her voice calm. We both made mistakes. But I won't let you hurt me again, or our child. He nodded, two eyes wet. I understand. They stood there, not as husband and wife, but as two people finally seeing each other clearly. When Ethan left, shoulders slumped. Vanessa let out a long breath. A contraction rippled through her belly, sharp but expected. She placed a hand on her stomach and whispered, We're almost there, little one. In that moment she felt at peace, not because she had won, but because she had grown. She hadn't just claimed back her power. She had rewritten her future. Vanessa's journey from scorned spouse to empowered shareholder is a testament to resilience and self-belief. Standing up to arrogance and dismissiveness, she fought not just for a personal victory, but for a better future for her unborn child. In the end, she discovered she was so much more than a millionaire's accessory. She was the architect of her own destiny. If Vanessa's story has gripped your heart, sparked your determination, or reminded you of the power each of us holds to rewrite our narratives, then take action. Like this video to show your support for stories of triumph. Share it to inspire others who might be in a dark place, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more compelling tales. Your engagement helps ensure these powerful stories reach those who need them most. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey. He never imagined the day would come when the woman he once dismissed would rise to power in a courtroom backed by a billionaire's bottomless resources. Yet there she was, testifying against him, her voice unwavering her belly, carrying the life he refused to acknowledge. The cameras flashed, capturing his every grimace, and the hushed tension in the room weighed on him like 1,000 secrets. He'd spent years building his empire, silencing dissent, paying off problems, but this time money couldn't buy his way out. Everything he thought he knew was about to be turned upside down in front of the world. Andrew Fitzgerald prided himself on self-reliance. At 35, he was the epitome of success, or so he believed. Raised in a modest household in Cincinnati, Ohio, he had fought tooth and nail to climb the corporate ladder. His father, Robert Fitzgerald, had worked the assembly line at a local factory for 4 decades, while his mother, Patricia, juggled 2 part-time jobs to help support their 3 children. Andrew often recalled how his siblings, Lisa and Michael, scoffed when he announced his ambitions to become a millionaire by age 30. They found it hard to believe that their baby brother would ever break the Fitzgerald cycle of paycheck-to-paycheck living. But Andrew was different. He devoured every book on business and finance. He could get his hands on titles by Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and other titans of industry. When he wasn't studying, he was out making connections, cold-calling potential mentors, pestering them for advice. Ambition blazed in his eyes, setting him apart from his family who just wanted stability. Andrew wanted more than stability. He wanted wealth and power. After graduating top of his class at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business, Andrew landed a job at Linden Capital, one of Chicago's most cutthroat hedge funds. His relentless work ethic and knack for spotting profitable trends in emerging markets earned him quick promotions. By the time he was 30, he had indeed made his first million, surpassing even his own lofty goal. But Andrew wasn't satisfied. With every promotion came a bigger bonus, and with every dollar he earned, his hunger grew. He saw his bank account as a scoreboard, proof that he was winning at life. He crossed paths with Charlotte Madison, a freelance journalist, at a charity gala hosted by the philanthropic wing of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The event had been abuzz with Chicago's most notable business leaders. Andrew, always eager to network, struck up conversations that might lead to new deals. Charlotte had been there on assignment for a small media outlet. She was investigating the reality behind the philanthropic facades of corporate elites, attempting to discover if their charitable acts were genuine or simply polished PR stunts. Andrew first caught her eye as he navigated the room with cool confidence. Tall, well-dressed, and bearing the practiced smile of someone who thrived in social settings, he was impossible to ignore. Charlotte, by contrast, was a quiet observer, tucking herself in the corner's notebook in hand, a glass of wine untouched on the table beside her. She took notes on the clusters of powerful individuals. She noticed Andrew's easy banter with figures like Mark Cuban, who attended as a guest speaker, and a cameo appearance by famed investor Ray Dalio, who teased Andrew about their friendly rivalries in the market. When Andrew finally approached Charlotte, he recognized her from a fleeting mention in an article he had read. Intrigued, he asked about her work. Charlotte's eyes lit up as she explained her passion for uncovering hidden stories, the ones that big money often tried to bury. She found Andrew's sharp wit engaging even if there was a streak of arrogance in how he talked about the philanthropic game. She was the first person in a long time who didn't fawn over his money or success. There was an electricity between them that neither could ignore. They exchanged business cards. A week later, Andrew invited Charlotte to dinner at one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, letting her pick his brain for her article. The night ended with them lingering on a quiet street corner, the tension crackling. Against all professional judgment, Charlotte found herself drawn to him. For Andrew, it was a welcome break from the monotony of dating women who only saw him as a meal ticket or a career boost. Little did Andrew know that this meeting would set into motion a series of events that would later haunt him. Their attraction was undeniable, but so were the glaring differences in how they viewed the world. They lived in separate realities. Andrew in a lofty tower built by hedge fund millions, Charlotte in a modest Chicago apartment scraping by on freelance checks. Yet for a moment, none of that mattered. They were pulled together by curiosity, the novelty of connecting with someone whose mind worked differently, whose experiences could shed new light on old perspectives. The relationship moved fast. Too fast. Within weeks, they were spending nights in each other's homes, bonding over midnight hot chocolates and in-depth talks about global economics and journalism ethics. Andrew took Charlotte to galas and introduced her to his well-connected colleagues, some of whom looked down on her for being just a journalist. Charlotte, never one to back down, held her ground, turning their scorn into a quiet triumph. Andrew found it exhilarating, someone who refused to be intimidated, who had enough self-confidence to stand toe-to-toe with his high-powered associates. Months passed, and the initial glow started to fade as their fundamental differences clashed. Charlotte felt uneasy about Andrew's unwavering loyalty to the corporate world. Andrew couldn't understand why Charlotte insisted on exposing corporate malfeasance. She was biting the hand that fed him. Arguments escalated, yet they always came back to each other, convinced that what they felt was stronger than the differences that threatened to tear them apart. They never spoke of children or the future, not concretely anyway. Andrew's world was built around quarterly results expansions and the next big acquisition. Charlotte's centered on the next big story, the next expose that could change a broken system. Neither was prepared for the news that would soon ripple through their lives and set the stage for a conflict more dramatic than either could have imagined. When Charlotte found out she was pregnant, her emotions ricocheted from shock to fear to a strange, guarded excitement. She took a pregnancy test in the dim light of her bathroom, the white tile beneath her feet cold against her bare soles. The faint double line felt like a cosmic shift. She waited a week, quietly scheduling an appointment with a local clinic to confirm the result before breaking the news to Andrew. Andrew's initial reaction was more surprise than anger. He carefully removed his designer glasses, exhaled, and stared at Charlotte. He wasn't sure how he felt. In the world of high-stakes finance, everything was planned, strategic, mapped out. He had never mapped out fatherhood, at least not now. "I need time to think." He murmured, his eyes drifting to the skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The shimmering lights of Chicago offered no answers. Charlotte, voice trembling, replied, "I'm keeping this baby." She had already made up her mind. Regardless of Andrew's feelings, this was her child. She had always wanted a family someday. The timing wasn't ideal, but life rarely adhered to convenient timelines. Andrew said nothing at first. Days stretched into weeks, and Charlotte felt the wedge between them grow. Occasionally he would leave voicemails or texts. "We need to talk, only to cancel at the last minute." When they did speak, their conversations were terse. Andrew was aloof, promising he'd figure something out, while Charlotte tried desperately to steer him toward the idea of co-parenting. The more she pushed, the more he seemed to shut down. Then came the moment that shattered any remaining hope. Andrew told Charlotte he couldn't risk his future to invest in a child he had never wanted. He spoke in cold business terms, calling it an unplanned liability that might compromise his ambitions. Charlotte was horrified. She had always known Andrew was ambitious, but she never expected him to categorize their child as if it were a miscalculated investment. "She's not a liability. She's my child," Charlotte hissed, tears brimming in her eyes. She had a growing suspicion the baby was a girl, though it was too early for medical certainty. The maternal instinct inside her was blossoming while Andrew's paternal side refused to awaken. Andrew's final words before leaving her apartment that night echoed in her mind. "Don't expect me to foot the bill for your decision. It wasn't just rejection. It was a complete abdication of responsibility." Charlotte felt as if she'd been cast adrift, forced to survive in a storm of her own making. Yet a defiance lit within her. This was no longer about persuading Andrew. This was about standing up for herself and her unborn child. She vowed she would find a way, even if it meant walking away from him for good. But Andrew's betrayal wasn't the end. Fate had a twisted sense of humor. Just when Charlotte thought she'd endure the pregnancy alone, another figure entered her life, someone whose resources and influence would upend Andrew's carefully controlled existence. Charlotte's freelance assignments dried up faster than expected. News outlets were tightening their belts, cutting budgets and focusing on sensationalist stories rather than the investigative pieces she specialized in. To make ends meet, she reached out to her network, hoping for leads on any assignment that could cover her mounting medical bills. It was through a former colleague that she learned about a special project funded by a philanthropic group called the Tolford Initiative. Rumor had it that the group's major benefactor was none other than Felix Talford, a reclusive British billionaire known for sweeping philanthropic gestures and occasional dramatic court battles against large corporations. There were whispers Felix once collaborated with real estate mogul Donald Trump on a property deal, parted ways on bad terms, and then pivoted to philanthropic endeavors as a way to one-up his former associates. The rumor mill even suggested that Bill Gates himself had once tried to recruit Felix to join the Giving Pledge, but Felix had declined, stating he preferred action over pledges. Charlotte found the idea of working for a private philanthropic group intriguing. She'd still be writing potentially highlighting compelling human stories, but she wouldn't be battling for scraps from traditional media outlets. Despite her pregnancy, or perhaps because of it, she needed something stable. Her first meeting with Felix Talford was surreal. It took place in a sleek conference room on the 27th floor of a building in downtown Chicago. Minimalist decor, large windows overlooking Lake Michigan, and a warmth from Felix that she hadn't expected. He was in his late 40s, with a calm smile that reached his blue-gray eyes. Tall and lean, he had a confidence that wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. He listened to Charlotte's story, how she found herself pregnant, how the father refused any support, how her investigative assignments were dwindling. Rather than judge, he simply nodded, peppering her with questions about her journalistic expertise, her passion for uncovering untold truths. It was clear Felix valued integrity above all. To Charlotte's astonishment, Felix offered her a position on the spot. "I can't promise it'll be easy or pay like you're used to, but I believe in your ability to capture stories that matter. You'll lead a new project focusing on social justice, human rights, and corporate accountability." Charlotte was stunned. She glanced down at her belly, anxious about disclosing how her pregnancy might affect her ability to travel or work odd hours. But Felix brushed off her concerns, saying, "We'll figure it out. This child shouldn't stop you from telling the world the stories that need to be told." And so a new chapter began. Charlotte dove into the philanthropic realm, traveling occasionally for domestic assignments, but also working remotely when her morning sickness was too severe. Felix even arranged for her to have an assistant. Petra, a bright graduate student from Northwestern University, who was eager to learn the ropes of investigative journalism. They formed a tight-knit team, gradually unearthing stories of environmental abuses, labor rights violations, and questionable corporate dealings. Their work was rigorous but fulfilling. Over dinners in the penthouse restaurant that Felix sometimes frequented, he would ask Charlotte about her pregnancy, offering quiet support. Never pity. There was a kindness in him that Charlotte hadn't seen in Andrew. Where Andrew spoke in terms of losses and liabilities, Felix spoke in terms of possibilities and hope. He even made sure her health care was covered under the Tolford Initiative's generous benefits. One evening, over a simple meal of roasted vegetables and sparkling water, Felix revealed a more personal side. He shared that he'd grown up in a middle-class family in London, lost his father to a debilitating illness, and swore to use his eventual fortune to improve lives and systems that failed so many. His father's struggle with medical bills had fueled Felix's philanthropic drive. A spark of trust ignited in Charlotte, who opened up about her own upbringing and her complicated relationship with Andrew. She never anticipated how this new partnership might eventually clash with Andrew's ambitions. Nor did she realize that Felix, with his quiet composure, was a formidable opponent with the means and willpower to challenge any threat to Charlotte's or the initiative's well-being. Their synergy as philanthropist and journalist grew into a bond that went beyond boss-employee boundaries. It was a friendship, one that Andrew would soon learn about in the most unexpected and public way. Life for Andrew continued at a breakneck pace. Linden Capital was expanding into risky, high-reward markets. Andrew spearheaded acquisitions that soared in short-term returns, making him even richer. With each new success, his sense of invincibility grew. Occasionally, guilt would gnaw at the back of his mind about Charlotte and the child, but he buried those feelings under piles of spreadsheets and stock tickers. He rationalized that Charlotte had made her choice, and so had he. He even dated around, though never forming any real connection. The moment conversations drifted toward family or future, he'd clam up. He tried not to follow Charlotte's life, but his curiosity got the better of him. Through social media whispers and business gossip, he picked up bits of information she was working for a billionaire philanthropist now. She was investigating corporate misconduct, and she seemed to be thriving, pregnancy and all. Andrew dismissed these rumors, convincing himself Charlotte was exaggerating, using the pregnancy as some twisted leverage for a bigger story. At times, Andrew's friends and colleagues would bring up child support, referencing sensational tabloid stories about millionaires who shirked paternal duties. He'd wave them off, claiming the situation was handled or blown out of proportion. He convinced himself it was better for Charlotte if he stayed away, that he was actually doing her a favor by not interfering. Yet Andrew's web of denial and excuses began to unravel when he found himself staring at an email from the Tolford Initiative requesting Linden Capital's cooperation in an ongoing inquiry into alleged environmental violations by a company under Linden Capital's umbrella. The subject read, "Urgent request for comment on Tolford Initiative investigative findings." Felix Tolford's name was at the bottom of the letter, as well as Charlotte's. Andrew felt a chill run down his spine. He read the letter 3 times, heart pounding. It seemed the Tolford Initiative was preparing to publish a damning report that could cost Linden Capital millions in fines, not to mention the PR nightmare. The email politely outlined alleged illegal dumping of toxic waste in low-income neighborhoods, part of a supply chain that Linden Capital had investments in. Andrew had a week to respond. Anger churned within him. Was Charlotte behind this? A quick phone call to one of his legal advisors confirmed the seriousness of the situation. The Tolford Initiative was known for thorough investigations. They rarely went public unless they had indisputable evidence. If Andrew couldn't kill the story, he'd have to mitigate it. What stung the most was knowing Charlotte's involvement. Had she orchestrated this to get back at him, Andrew wasn't sure if he was being paranoid. Still, the stakes couldn't be higher. He scrambled to convene an emergency meeting with Linden Capital's board. Some members suggested paying hush money to keep the Tolford Initiative quiet. Others suggested going on the offensive, discrediting Felix Tolford and Charlotte personally. Andrew, fueled by panic and betrayal, considered every possible angle. He found a perverse satisfaction in the idea of discrediting Charlotte, painting her as a bitter woman seeking revenge because he'd refused to fund her pregnancy. But rational minds in the boardroom cautioned that attacking a pregnant journalist, especially one backed by a well-respected billionaire, could backfire spectacularly. Andrew's nightmares intensified. He'd dream of swirling headlines, corporate tycoon's love child abandoned, while mother exposes his company's dirty secrets. He'd jolt awake, drenched in sweat, fumbling for his phone, scanning news feeds to see if the story had broken. In his few moments of clarity, he asked himself if this was karma for refusing to stand by Charlotte. Time was running out for him to respond to the Tolford Initiative's letter. He had no idea that the real bombshell would drop not in a carefully researched exposé, but in a courtroom drama that would rock his entire world. One crisp afternoon, Andrew stepped out of his office to grab a breath of fresh air. The bustling city noise offered a strange comfort, a reminder he was still in the real world. He turned the corner of the building when a young woman, eyes downcast, approached him. "Mr. Andrew Fitzgerald?" she asked quietly. Andrew nodded, frowning. In her hand was a manila envelope. "You've been served," she said, passing him the envelope. Before Andrew could ask questions, she scurried away, leaving him standing on the crowded sidewalk, stunned. Inside the envelope was a legal summons. Charlotte was taking him to court for paternal support, naming him as the father of her child. She claimed he had refused to acknowledge any responsibility, and she was well within her rights to seek financial and emotional support. Andrew's heart pounded. The test date was scheduled 3 weeks away, and the summons strongly suggested a paternity test and financial disclosures. Andrew's first phone call was to his lawyer. A second later, he texted Charlotte in a rage. "How could you do this? We could have settled this privately." He never got a reply. Instead, a day later, he received a formal letter from the Tolford Initiative's legal team, stating Charlotte would no longer communicate with him outside of official channels. The following weeks were a blur of tense strategy sessions with Andrew's legal team. They debated how to frame his defense. One suggested casting doubt on Charlotte's credibility, but Andrew balked. It was too risky. Another proposed a settlement, but Andrew's pride refused. He felt cornered, humiliated. By now, rumors circulated among his peers. The father of Charlotte's child was the same man at the helm of Linden Capital, the same man who might face environmental lawsuits thanks to Charlotte's investigative findings. The impending court date loomed like a thundercloud. Andrew's personal brand was at stake. For so long he had believed that with enough money, any problem could be solved. This time the problem was a living, breathing child. It was a moral and emotional issue he couldn't solve with the stroke of a pen. In a bizarre twist, the environmental scandal overshadowed the paternity suit. Andrew's legal team juggled two crises, each one threatening to topple him. Meanwhile, Charlotte's influence grew under Felix Tolford's mentorship. She landed interviews on respectable media platforms, discussing corporate responsibility, never once mentioning the father of her baby. Yet that subtlety did not diminish the tension. The media loved whispering about who the father might be, fueling speculation that the big reveal would come in court. As the court date approached, Andrew found himself in a sleepless daze. He paced his penthouse, ignoring calls from anxious board members at Linden Capital. He wondered if Charlotte was going to bring Felix Tolford as a witness. The idea felt surreal, two unstoppable forces aligning to destroy him. The courthouse buzzed with reporters. Word had leaked about a mystery father and the presence of a philanthropic billionaire supporting the mother. Camera crews lined the steps, eager for a glimpse of the parties involved. Andrew arrived in a tailored navy suit, flanked by his attorneys, trying to maintain composure amidst the flash of cameras. Onlookers whispered rumors pointing at him. Then came Charlotte, looking poised in a simple black maternity dress, her baby bump impossible to ignore. She walked confidently, her chin high. Beside her was a soft-spoken older man in an impeccable grey suit, Felix Tolford. Murmurs rose among the reporters. Could it be that the rumoured billionaire was here in person to back Charlotte's legal battle? Andrew felt a surge of indignation. Felix Tolford didn't belong in this personal matter. Yet there he was, guiding Charlotte past the throngs of media, ignoring shouted questions about the nature of his involvement. The scene felt absurd, like a plot twist in a theatrical drama. Inside the courtroom, Andrew's lawyer attempted to argue that Charlotte's claims were unsubstantiated and that the paternity test results needed to be established before any talk of support. Charlotte's side calmly agreed. Their position was simple. If Andrew was the father, then the child deserved both emotional and financial care. The judge ordered a paternity test, setting a follow-up hearing in a month. Andrew was relieved to know there'd be at least some breathing room, but the real shock came after the short session ended. As they exited the courtroom, Andrew watched as Charlotte and Felix Tolford engaged in a brief conversation with a group of reporters. Felix stepped forward, his voice measured. "I'm here today to support a personal friend, Ms. Madison, in her quest for justice. We believe in accountability and responsibility, whether it be in the corporate boardroom or in family matters. The Tolford Initiative supports Charlotte's commitment to ensuring her child receives proper care and recognizes her right to hold any relevant party accountable." Andrew seethed. He stormed past a cluster of reporters, ignoring their questions. How dare Felix Tolford, a man Andrew barely knew, involve himself so publicly? Andrew's face felt hot with rage. This wasn't a philanthropic drive. It was war. The next day, headlines screamed, "Billionaire backs pregnant journalist in paternity battle against hedge fund mogul." Social media was ablaze with comments. Some praised Charlotte for fighting for her rights, while others accused her of gold digging. The toxic swirl of online opinion battered Andrew, whose carefully crafted image of success and respectability was under siege. Yet amid the chaos, Andrew's soul cracked a little. For the first time, he wondered what kind of father he might be if he truly was the father. He tried to recall any flicker of excitement at the thought of a child, but all he felt was fear and resentment. He had built a life around measured risks and maximum gains. Fatherhood had never factored into his calculations. In the weeks leading up to the second hearing, Andrew took the paternity test. The wait for the results was excruciating each day, an interminable limbo. His lawyers kept him busy with depositions relating to the environmental scandal, which now had an official investigation launched by the state's Attorney General. The Tallfoot Initiative's report had been escalated to the authorities, further deepening Andrew's troubles. Finally, the day arrived. Andrew sat in a sterile conference room across from Charlotte Felix and their legal team. The court-appointed DNA specialist confirmed the test results. Andrew Fitzgerald was indeed the father. Andrew's stomach lurched. There was no longer room for denial. He gripped the arms of his chair, forcing himself to maintain composure. Charlotte's face was unreadable. Felix placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, a quiet gesture that spoke volumes. Andrew felt a flash of envy. He should have been the one comforting her, not some billionaire with philanthropic flair. Legal negotiations immediately took a new turn. Charlotte's attorneys demanded financial support for prenatal care hospital costs and ongoing child-rearing expenses once the baby was born. They also requested that Andrew set up a trust fund for the child's education. Andrew balked at the numbers. His lawyers countered with a lower offer. Charlotte's team refused to budge, pointing out that Andrew's net worth was more than capable of covering those expenses without breaking a sweat. Felix stood by Charlotte's side, silent but formidable. His presence alone was enough to tip the scales. Everyone in the room understood that if Andrew forced a brutal legal battle, Felix would spare no expense to protect Charlotte's interests. Andrew's lawyers privately advised him that the reputational damage of a drawn-out fight would be astronomical. The story had gained national attention. Any attempt to paint Charlotte as a grasping opportunist might backfire given the moral high ground she possessed. With a nauseous resignation, Andrew agreed in principle to most of the financial terms. Yet even as he signed preliminary paperwork, he felt bitterness coil in his gut. He was cornered, forced to pay for a child he never wanted by a woman who had soared to new heights under the wing of a billionaire rival. He blamed Charlotte, failing to recognize the child's innocence in the matter. That same day, Andrew returned to his penthouse, sank into his leather couch, and stared at the skyline. For the first time since he was a broke student in Cincinnati, Andrew felt powerless. No strategy, no cunning twist, no bribe could extricate him from this predicament without a cost. The looming environmental case only magnified his sense of entrapment. In the silent expanse of his living room, Andrew finally let the truth sink in. He would be a father. A child would soon exist who bore his genes. Everything he had built, all the achievements he prided himself on, now felt hollow. He had monetized every aspect of his life. Yet fatherhood refused to be monetized. It demanded something deeper. While the paternity case drew the media's attention, the environmental scandal roiled beneath the surface, threatening to erupt at any moment. The Tallfoot Initiative had shared its findings with the Illinois Attorney General's office, sparking a formal investigation into Linden Capital's potential involvement in toxic dumping. Several of Andrew's top lieutenants were subpoenaed to testify. The board was livid, pressuring Andrew to find a quick resolution. Andrew's crisis managers recommended a public relations campaign. Highlight: Linden Capital's philanthropic efforts feature Andrew in a series of interviews where he portrayed himself as a misunderstood tycoon with a heart of gold. The attorneys, however, cautioned that any public statement could be used against him in court. Andrew was stuck in a tightrope walk between legal caution and reputational salvage. To make matters worse, there were whispers of a class action lawsuit forming, representing low-income communities affected by the pollution. The Tallfoot Initiative was rumored to be offering organizational and financial support to the plaintiffs, though Felix never publicly confirmed it. Every day, Andrew woke up wondering if that would be the day he found himself named as a defendant. Amid this chaos, Andrew received a call from his mother, Patricia. She had seen the news, recognized Charlotte's name, and pieced together that she was carrying Andrew's baby. Patricia was a woman of simple values, having lived her entire life in modest means. She pleaded with Andrew to at least meet Charlotte face to face and show some compassion. She didn't care about legal battles or PR spin. She cared about her grandchild. Andrew brushed off her concerns, claiming he was handling it. Deep down, her words gnawed at him. He began to wonder what his father, hard-working, honorable Robert Fitzgerald, would think if he saw how Andrew was acting. The pang of guilt that followed threatened to unravel the wall of self-justification Andrew had built around himself. As the due date for Charlotte's baby approached, Andrew found himself increasingly isolated. Board members at Linden Capital distanced themselves either to shield their own reputations or to position themselves for a leadership coup if Andrew were forced out. His personal relationships were in tatters. He'd broken off casual dalliances that offered no emotional support. Even old friends found him too toxic to associate with publicly. One afternoon, Andrew sat in a nearly empty corner booth at a dimly lit bar. Unable to face the opulence of high-end clubs, he had retreated to anonymity. He sipped a whiskey neat, lost in thought, when someone slid into the seat across from him. It was Nathan Halliday, a former colleague from Andrew's early days at Linden Capital. Nathan had left the firm to start his own socially responsible investment fund, a choice Andrew had once mocked. Now Nathan was one of the few people who approached Andrew without condemnation or condescension. "I heard about everything," Nathan said gently. "Rough times." Andrew nodded, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Nathan offered a sympathetic smile. "Look, you probably don't want advice from me, but I'll give it anyway. Stop fighting. Do the right thing. Support your child. Take responsibility for the environmental mess if your firm really is at fault, and rebuild from there." Andrew bristled. "That's easy for you to say. You don't know the pressure I'm under." Nathan sighed. "Pressure is part of life. How we respond defines us. Let me tell you something: investors and employees can smell desperation. They also respect a leader who admits mistakes. Right now, you're clinging to illusions of control. You need to face reality." The conversation left Andrew off balance. Part of him wanted to dismiss Nathan's words as naive moralizing. Another part recognized the truth in them. The Andrew Fitzgerald of a decade ago had been hungry, determined, but not cruel. He had believed in some form of ethical boundary. Where had that belief gone? As Andrew parted ways with Nathan, an uneasy sense of introspection settled over him. It haunted him all the way home, seeping into his restless sleep. Late one evening, Andrew's phone vibrated. It was a message from Charlotte's lawyer requesting an urgent conference call. Confused, Andrew dialed in. Charlotte's calm but firm voice greeted him. "My water broke early," she said. "I'm heading to the hospital now." Andrew's mind went blank. The baby wasn't due for another 2 weeks. Words caught in his throat, but Charlotte continued. "You don't have to come. I just wanted you to know." 1,000 thoughts raced through Andrew's head. He had the legal right to be there, but Charlotte had every reason to bar him from her presence, given how he'd treated her. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and bolted out the door. For the first time in months, his actions weren't dictated by lawyers or public relations. They were dictated by an urgent, primal call his child was about to enter the world. The hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Andrew approached the reception breathless and was directed to the maternity ward. Charlotte was in a private room, arranged by Felix Tolford. When Andrew finally saw her sweat-drenched hair framing her tense face, his heart twisted. Felix stood on the opposite side of the bed, giving Andrew a sidelong glance, measuring. Hours blurred. Charlotte was in labor, moaning through contractions. Andrew hovered awkwardly, unsure if his presence was wanted. At one point she screamed, and he instinctively reached out to steady her hand. In that moment, she gripped his fingers with a force that belied her exhaustion. The two locked eyes, and for a breath, the lawsuits and animosities vanished. Felix stepped back, allowing Andrew to play his role. Despite the tension, it felt right for the father to be at the mother's side in this most primal moment. Nurses and doctors buzzed in and out, offering reassurance. Andrew stayed encouraging Charlotte to push counting through contractions, focusing on her face to keep her calm. Tears streaked her cheeks. He whispered apologies she could barely hear above her own cries. When the baby finally arrived, a girl, as Charlotte had suspected, the doctor announced her, with a jubilant, "It's a beautiful baby girl." The newborn's wails tore through the room, an echo of fresh life that drowned out the months of bitterness. Andrew found himself trembling. Charlotte, panting, managed a tired but triumphant smile. Felix offered a quiet nod, stepping away to give them space. A nurse asked if Andrew wanted to cut the umbilical cord. Unsure, he nodded, hands shaking as he took the scissors. The moment felt surreal, an irreversible act that bound him to this small, crying life forever. The baby was placed gently in Charlotte's arms, swaddled in a soft blanket. Andrew peered down at his daughter's scrunched face, overcome by a tidal wave of emotion he didn't fully understand. She was so fragile, so innocent. All his rationalizations about not wanting a child crumbled under the weight of her tiny existence. The idea that he had ever considered her a liability felt monstrous. Charlotte's face softened. She glanced at Andrew, tears brimming, and simply said, "Do you want to hold her?" Without waiting for his response, she delicately passed the baby into Andrew's unsure arms. The infant's cries ebbed slightly, as though sensing something familiar in Andrew's shaky presence. In that instant, Andrew Fitzgerald's world shifted. Whatever illusions he'd held about being in control, about money and success defining his worth, faded in the glow of this new, perfect life. He cradled his daughter against his chest, a single tear slipping down his cheek. For the first time in ages, Andrew felt both completely vulnerable and deeply alive. Mother and baby rested in the hospital room, the ordeal of labor behind them. Andrew lingered, reluctant to leave. Charlotte's exhaustion was evident, her eyes fluttering, but a hint of relief curved her lips. Felix approached quietly, offering Andrew a polite nod. In another life, they might have been allies, billionaire and hedge fund manager, bridging philanthropy and finance. In this one, they were entangled in a personal and professional storm. Felix suggested stepping outside to let Charlotte rest. Andrew followed him into the hospital corridor. The sterile white walls pressed in on them as they stood face to face, the hum of overhead lighting the only sound. "She's a brave woman," Felix said. "She's been under tremendous stress these past months. I hope you realize that." Andrew's throat felt tight. "I do. I also realize I could have done things differently. But it's complicated." Felix took a measured breath. "It's only as complicated as you make it, Andrew. You have a child now. Whether or not you want to be in her life is your decision, but the law and morality demands that you support her. If you choose otherwise, I'll do everything in my power to ensure Charlotte and her daughter have the resources they need." Andrew tensed. Is that a threat? A promise, Felix replied calmly. I won't apologize for protecting them, but I'd rather see you rise to the occasion. Perhaps this can be a turning point for both your personal life and your business practices. Before Andrew could respond, a nurse informed them that Charlotte needed some rest and that visiting hours were over. Felix shook Andrew's hand in a surprisingly cordial gesture. Andrew lingered a moment, peering through the glass at his newborn daughter in the neonatal viewing area. He felt something akin to awe overshadowed by dread at the tidal wave of responsibility. Charlotte named the baby Emily Madison Fitzgerald. She gave the father's last name to Emily, even though she was within her right to name her otherwise. When Andrew first heard the name, it stirred conflicting emotions: gratitude that Charlotte acknowledged his role, and a paralyzing fear that he was ill-equipped to be anyone's father. Over the ensuing weeks, Andrew visited the hospital sporadically, always battling the swirl of paparazzi who hoped to capture the deadbeat dad turned doting father. He told himself it was to keep up appearances, but in truth, each time he held Emily, he felt a glimmer of paternal instinct he couldn't deny. Meanwhile, at Linden Capital, the board grew restless. The Attorney General's office moved closer to filing charges. Some shareholders were threatening a revolt, demanding Andrew's resignation to salvage what was left of the company's reputation. The tension came to a head when Andrew realized he couldn't focus. His priorities were shifting against his will. He found himself wanting to see Emily rather than attend board meetings. One day, Andrew snapped at a board member who criticized him for letting his personal issues overshadow the firm's objectives. Standing at the head of a long, polished table, Andrew glared around the room and said, I won't deny I have personal responsibilities, but I'm also the CEO. If anyone has a problem with that, they can leave. A few did walk out, spooking the others. Andrew felt a wave of frustration. He left the building, ignoring the questions from anxious employees. On a whim, he decided to drive to Charlotte's apartment, a modest place in a quiet neighborhood on Chicago's north side. He found her sitting in a small living room, Emily asleep in a bassinet. Charlotte's face was still tired, but the soft radiance of motherhood glowed around her. Andrew hesitated at the door, fumbling with an apology. She quietly let him in, inviting him to see the baby. Emily stirred, and Andrew gently lifted her, cradling her carefully. For the first time in his life, Andrew Fitzgerald felt he was exactly where he needed to be. That tender moment was shattered when Andrew's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, an urgent message from one of his senior executives. Subject line, we have a problem. Andrew excused himself, stepping into the hallway to take the call. The board had voted to temporarily remove him from critical decision-making, citing distractions and potential legal entanglements. Andrew felt betrayed and enraged, but in the background he could hear Emily fussing and Charlotte's soothing voice. It was a fork in the road. Should he fight tooth and nail to keep control of the company and quell these crises? Or should he embrace fatherhood, face accountability, and rebuild from a place of integrity? Andrew ended the call, returning to find Charlotte watching him with an unreadable expression. She didn't say a word, but her eyes asked the question, "Who are you going to be?" Andrew. The environmental case advanced swiftly. Key executives at Linden Capital were indicted, and the media feasted on the scandal. Andrew found himself named in the suit, alleged to have had knowledge of the toxic dumping, though whether he had actively participated was still under investigation. Share prices plummeted. Investors demanded accountability. Andrew's lawyers strategized a defense that might lay blame on lower-tier managers. They claimed Andrew had been kept in the dark. But damning emails surfaced, including at least two, in which Andrew's name was in the CC line, referencing Project Greywater, the code name for dumping. It was unclear if Andrew had ever read them, but his name was there, a black mark in the eyes of the public. Public outrage skyrocketed. Protesters rallied outside Linden Capital's doors, brandishing signs about corporate greed and environmental justice. Felony charges were floated by the Attorney General's office, though it was uncertain if they would stick to Andrew himself. In an attempt to salvage the firm, the board demanded Andrew step down at least temporarily. Resisting might mean the entire company collapsed, leading to thousands of layoffs. Andrew fought tears of frustration alone in his office, the city skyline mocking him. He thought about Emily, the life he'd brought into this world. He had wanted success at any cost, but now the cost was too steep. In a final board meeting, Andrew conceded. He announced he would step aside as CEO, taking leave to deal with personal matters and cooperate with the investigation. In a tense, solemn vote, the board accepted his resignation. Andrew walked out a box of personal items in his arms, past employees who avoided eye contact. The empire he had built was no longer his. For a while, Andrew retreated from public life, holed up in his penthouse, uncertain of his next move. The fear of criminal charges loomed through his lawyers indicated a plea deal might be possible if he cooperated fully. Andrew spent hours pacing his mind, drifting to Emily's face. One morning he gathered the courage to call Charlotte. She answered, her voice neutral. He asked if he could see Emily. After a long pause, she agreed on the condition. He come to them no chauffeurs, no pretense. When he arrived at her apartment, Andrew was startled by how modest it was, a far cry from his opulent lifestyle. Yet there was warmth in every corner, a baby swinger playmat, pictures of Charlotte's family on the mantel. Emily was napping in her bassinet, tiny hands curled into fists. Charlotte offered him coffee, and they spoke in hushed tones so as not to wake the baby. Hesitantly, Andrew apologized, not just for refusing financial support, but for dismissing Charlotte's needs, and for how he had let his ambition blind him. She listened, eyes revealing both hurt and cautious hope. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Andrew said quietly. "I just want to do better. For Emily." Charlotte considered him. Emily deserves a father who will show up, not just financially, but emotionally. Andrew nodded, tears pricking his eyes. "I'm ready to try." Over the following weeks, Andrew took small steps toward rebuilding a relationship with Charlotte and forging a bond with Emily. He changed diapers badly at first, learned how to rock Emily to sleep, and discovered the odd delight of hearing her coo. Every giggle felt like redemption. Every crying fit a lesson in patience he desperately needed. Felix Tolford remained in the background, cordial but watchful. He offered no apology for his earlier stance. Andrew couldn't blame him. Felix had acted in Charlotte's best interest, something Andrew was only beginning to understand. Eventually, the paternity suit evolved into a formal hearing on child support and custody. Despite Andrew's newfound willingness to participate, the legal wheels had to turn. The media turned out again in droves, itching for a dramatic finale. Andrew arrived at the courthouse differently this time. No entourage, no posture of defiance. He looked more like a man humbled by circumstances than a corporate titan. Charlotte sat at a table with her attorney. Felix was present, but merely as moral support. During the proceedings, Charlotte's lawyer acknowledged Andrew's voluntary financial contributions made since Emily's birth, including the establishment of a trust fund. They cited Andrew's resignation from Linden Capital As evidence, he was taking steps to address the environmental scandal. Andrew's lawyer emphasized his commitment to being involved in Emily's life. The judge, stern and pragmatic, finalized the child support arrangement, ensuring Emily's future was secure. Visitation rights were set, with Charlotte retaining primary custody until Emily was older. An additional clause required Andrew to participate in parenting classes and therapy sessions, a measure intended to facilitate his transition into fatherhood. As the gavel came down, the case ended more anticlimactically than the media had hoped. There were no fiery speeches or dramatic breakdowns. Instead, there was the solemn weight of an official record. Andrew Fitzgerald was recognized as Emily's father, legally bound to support and nurture her. Stepping out of the courtroom, Andrew came face to face with the throng of reporters again. But this time, he offered a simple statement. "I love my daughter. I will do what's right for her and her mother. I ask for privacy as we move forward." Felix and Charlotte stood to one side, quietly observing. The flash of cameras lit the moment like a surreal stage. Then, with measured steps, Charlotte walked over. She handed Emily now a bright-eyed infant, curious about the noise, to Andrew. Cameras went wild, capturing the father holding his daughter, the mother standing beside him, and the billionaire who had made it all possible in the background. Thus concluded one chapter in their lives. Yet another was just beginning. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster, a story of love, betrayal, and unexpected redemption. Andrew Fitzgerald's rise and fall remind us that success without integrity can lead to ruin, while true victory often lies in taking responsibility. Charlotte Madison's unwavering resolve shows the strength it takes to stand up for what's right, even when it means challenging a powerful adversary. Felix Talford's quiet but unyielding support underscores that genuine wealth is measured by the difference we make in others' lives. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with friends who might need a spark of courage, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales. Your support helps us continue to bring you stories that reflect life's toughest challenges and the resilience within us all. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.